Welcome to the MarTech Matrix, the podcast where technology meets marketing and the future becomes now. Every week, we dive deep into the world of marketing technology, exploring how digital tools, AI, data analytics, and innovative strategies are reshaping the marketing landscape. Join us as we navigate through this complex matrix, interviewing industry experts, dissecting emerging trends, and decoding strategies that are setting the pace in this digital age. Your host, Sean Simon, has spent the last 30 years leading a variety of MarTech companies from broadcast.com to Criteo. Now he is the co-founder of the Cogent Collective, a community where marketing and e-commerce leaders come together to discover and vet solutions that address their business needs, bypassing all the noise that comes with technology searches. Learn about the community and see if it's a fit for you at cogentcollective.com. Today, Sean speaks with Siggi Rakovich, founder and CEO of Hunch, a market-leading automation platform that combines unique data-driven creative, performance workflows with automated media buying processes to help today's marketers focus on what matters most. They will be discussing all things social, AI, creative, and performance. After the show, head on over to themartechmatrix.com for show notes, contact information, and details on upcoming episodes. Now, get ready to enter the matrix.
Siggi, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, Sean. Thanks for inviting me to have a chat.
Yeah, we're like I said, we're really excited. Let's unpack that intro. Why does Hunch exist?
Yeah, it's a good question. We, as a company, exist because there are some significant changes that are happening in the marketing teams and the creative teams across board, across different verticals, across different teams. Today, if you think about what marketers are being asked to do as opposed to what they were being asked to do 10 years ago is, quite different. It's particularly when you think of social, right? So there are all these problems that are popping up for marketers, right? In terms of doing more with less, right? Getting better performance, perhaps with same budgets or, maybe even lesser budgets. But ultimately, it's a different ballgame today on social than it was maybe 10 years ago. And essentially, marketers are feeling the squeeze. If you think about, the average marketer today and all the work they have to do in order to improve their performance, it's actually pretty staggering, right? And a lot of that has to do with, the number of campaigns that they have to launch, but also the number of creatives that they have to produce, right? If you look at the patterns of usage today on social and how fast the thumbs are, you can quickly sort of get to a point where marketers, in order for them to be successful today, continually have to deliver interesting, innovative, attention-grabbing creatives for all the different audiences on social. And so Hunch essentially solves the problem of shortening, that latency of what type of creative a marketer thinks it would work, and how fast it can actually build and deploy that creative to see that it actually works.
So it's a function of people's media consumption has increased dramatically on social over the last 10 years. The amount of time they spend per day is a lot. And I think there's this behavior, I see it with my kids. I know I do it sometimes, where we're just endless scrolling, right? So I think if I see things over and over again, it kind of loses its luster, right? So it's that creative fatigue I think you're hitting on there, right? So brands really need to make sure that they have enough creative that speaks to each individual before anything burns out. The days of like, let's run a piece of creative for a month and then swap it out, those are long gone. We're talking like maybe a few minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, I mean, it's probably not a few minutes, right? But if you think about, sort of the way the native platforms are developing, right? AI is something that's, been really growing at Meta and Snap and, all the platforms, including Google, YouTube, and so forth. And so the platforms are getting really smart in terms of the audiences and who they're going after. And actually, incidentally, they're making it super easy to get to those audiences, right? So with PMax on Google or with Advantage Plus now on Meta, you're essentially, have a super easy way to launch something. So the most important lever that marketers have, to combat, and sort of win today on social is how do you take the data that you have, right? All the signals that you have internally, knowing what type of product you have, what's working, and then figure out a system or a workflow to create, let's get data-driven creative at scale to deliver into this AI that's on Meta and Snap. And so that's what essentially Hunch excels at, is figuring out ways, to connect the data point from a brand, connect it to a creative production engine, and then deliver it. Essentially what Hunch is, at a very sort of rudimentary explanation, on the one hand, Hunch is a creative manufacturing facility. So we can, build thousands of images and videos, or hundreds of thousands of millions of images and videos that are based on some data, some logic. So that's the production facility. On the other hand, we are a distribution facility. So once we sort of produce this creative through AI, through data, then we distribute this across all of the different channels where those audiences sit. And so the beautiful thing that happens then, once you have this sort of, a production facility and you have a distribution facility that you don't have maybe today, when you combine those two, marketing teams now have an innovative approach to delivering marketing excellence. And so that could be in the form of, let's say, now you're doing maybe localization as opposed to a national wide campaign. You're thinking hyper local, right? So now you have in thousands of different cities or hundreds of different DMAs, you're personalizing the image or the video for that specific community, or you're doing dynamic things in terms of catalogs or lots of different variations, figuring out what works, testing different intros and bodies and outros for videos and so forth. So there's lots of innovative approaches that marketers have the capability to do today if they have some sort of scalable system that they've put in place.
So you're sort of a tool, if you will, for the marketing teams or the creative teams at a brand or at an agency, and you're helping them just sort of expand on what they already do well, right? So they're creative folks, they develop great creative, but they can't develop thousands and thousands of pieces of creative for individuals with unique messaging based on where they live or what the weather is or what products they looked at. And so you're taking sort of their creative idea and expanding it, allowing them to scale that creative much more quickly and without adding a ton of resources to sort of create more assets.
Correct. That's a good way to look at it. And so let's sort of unwrap that in a very let's say simple use case. The media team never has enough creative, right? In order to fight sort of the return on ad spend or the CPMs, they're asking for more creative from their creative teams, the brand teams, or the internal teams, right? And so when they have a strategy that they want to deploy, they're essentially putting pressures on the creative team. And then the creative team, to take that example of hyperlocalization or localization. Let's say that actually works. It gives you better performance, which most of the time it does. The creative team is now tasked of doing 100 videos or 500 videos or changing one thing in 500 things. And the way that process actually works is the media team says, all right, cool, let's change, these 4 things on this piece of creative across all these locations. That gets put into some production environment. They create a ticket on Asana, or Monday.com, and then they put a brief, and the creative team essentially goes in, starts putting their questions in, and they put up what draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. They go into their dungeon and they put a certain creative angle, and they produce those creatives. Then they create a WeTransfer file. They add it to the Monday.com. Then the media team downloads the transfer file and looks at the creative and then gives some comments. Or perhaps in the first flight it was all right. Then it takes that specific creative, downloads the 100 assets, goes to Facebook, uploads 100 videos, goes to Snap, uploads 100 videos, goes somewhere else. And that's a process. It's very meaningless, right? And it takes a lot of time. And so that's what a lot of marketers are spending their time on, right? And so what Hunch does is essentially shortens the latency between what creative the media thinks it will work and how fast it gets produced, but also deployed. So we create a system where, for example, we give them a Google Sheet where they can start adding rows or start changing things. And then we produce an update at any given point, 5,000 images and videos that are then re-rendered or reproduced and automatically sent to those locations. And then the media team says, okay, does that specific strategy work? So essentially what we're getting at as sort of a trend, what I've sort of seen is we're going towards this sort of, let's call it the master marketer, where now, and particularly with the proliferation of AI and the capability to create, right, and the capability to sort of ideate and analyze, you're essentially getting to that position where within specific teams, they're are sort of popping up, these master marketers that we could maybe call vendor or tech stack managers, where they're connecting different systems and essentially automating a lot of the work that needs to be done. And so if we were to, like, let's say, explore and extrapolate what the future might hold, with the Mid-Journeys of the world. Sean, you're not a video person. I'm not either. But I guarantee you in 6 months' time, we'll be able to create a super duper video that's going to be, of our kids playing some sport. And it's going to be great, right? And we're just going to be production ready.
Yeah.
So with that being said, essentially what's happening, investing in creative production, investing in creative teams is a law of diminishing return, because a lot of that will have to be automated a certain sense. So you'll have a bunch of creative, teams will be in a way, sort of freed up to do all the creative things that they want. But then that sort of shifts the problem, the hot potato, in a different direction, which is like, what do you do with that creative, right? So then what Hunch does, we have both the production capacity of scalability of ideation, but we also have the distribution capacity. So then we distribute that creative. But then there's a feedback loop that tells the teams what's working, what's not working, that turns things off and on, that essentially optimizes around the creative. So there's different types of use cases. Typically, we are an agency first partner. So we partner with agencies and we help agencies essentially acquire this sort of capability that essentially solves for three of their biggest problems. One is looking at how can they innovate with their current customers, their current brands that they have, right? How can they produce innovative solutions and deliver that? Essentially, think of retention, think of like those brands that are perhaps up for renewal. Hunch comes in as a partner that helps ideate around those specific problems. Secondly, we work with agencies on, let's say, new business or pitches. And when they essentially go towards some larger enterprises that need specific solutions that are innovative, Hunch brings the platform, but also the expertise of how to deliver to those brands innovative, scalable solutions that they would normally not do within their own team, right? And lastly, for agencies, as we partner with them, we look at, workflow efficiencies, right? There's all these, types of, brands, and they all have different asks. And there's certainly some brands that take more of resources, but they're not as, let's say, ROI positive in a certain sense. So what Hunch does in that case, we work with agencies to figure out ways to automate certain workflows, right? If it's creative production or if it's campaign launching, we can easily build a system to launch 70 campaigns and keep that system sort of automated, right? Thereby sort of saving the times. And actually, a good, explanation for agencies. We had one of our agency partners had 20, designers, right? They were a lead generation agency. And they estimated that about 2 hours a day, every designer was spending on some meaningless edits, like add this, change this, or do something, right? 2 hours, right? Sorry, there was 15 designers, if I got my math correct. So it was 15 designers, 2 hours, that's 30 hours a day that the creative team was spending on meaningless tasks, right? And so if we look at the average cost in that country, we ended up, they ended up estimating that it was roughly about 25,000 per month that, the agency was investing in non-meaningful, not, strategic sort of creative work. And so we essentially automated a lot of that. So on an annual scale, that's, even more. So that's on the agency side, how we partner and how we bring technology and sort of innovative solutions.
Wow. So if I can just go back to summarize that, put a bow on sort of why Hunch exists, it's really to help brands scale their social creative more easily, because it allows them to perform better, right? It's generate more performance. But you just hit there on the end is, I think, really powerful, that it's really hard to estimate at the very beginning of a conversation, which is how much time are your people wasting doing things that can be automated, so they can free them up to do more stuff.
The time is definitely a factor. But I was chatting with an agency, a large agency that works in lots of different markets, including UK, US. And one of the things that we discovered in the chat was, and this doesn't show up in the P&L. This doesn't show up in sort of the revenue or anywhere in the spreadsheet for management. But happiness of marketers, if there was a curve right now, right? If we were like over the last, let's say 10, 20 years, marketing was super exciting. Now, people are sort of at break points because they're being asked to do so much for the same amount of, let's say, work, right? So they're being asked to do a lot more work for the same amount of price. So there's this there's this interesting dynamic where there's a lot of pressures on the production team, a lot of pressures on the media team. And so there's a lot of, let's call it, lost sleep, not to even use greater words like, mental health, but there's a lot of things that are happening that we see where you see things breaking, right? So when agencies or marketing teams should ask themselves, it's not just about, the performance, and that's great. It's not just about cost reduction. It's really, the underlining theme is, do teams, those advanced, innovative marketing teams, really want to bring on board platforms, and workflow automation solutions that actually make the team more efficient and thereby making them more, happy in a certain sense? Because nobody really wants to like say, all right, cool, I really want to do 500 updates of this one thing, right? No, like, what's the happiness factor of
Yeah.
that, Or like in media, open up, ads manager and, check on 100 different campaigns for one thing, that's very, very non-happy work, I would call it, right? So those are the types of improvements that we bring to these marketers, because ultimately your marketers want to advance where they're doing today and how they're doing things today, and they want to work on more strategic things and analysis and so forth. So they kind of offload that to AI or automation, right? And so one of the things that's sort of propping out, you mentioned in terms of social, what's really hot in social today, actually yesterday's Meta stock was just skyrocketing, right? So that was one of the things that we should discuss. It's like the what AI means for the industry, right? And it's both good and bad. It's both friend and foe, right? And so when you think of AI, you should think of how do you really align your organization to take advantage of AI, right? Across both internal teams, whether it's client facing or whether it's your own internal sort of production or efficiencies. But Meta, obviously they've changed course and they're now fantastically growing. But one of the reasons is AI, sort of open sourcing AI. The second is they're doing lots of interesting innovation in terms of Advantage Plus, or for example now, as we're partners with Meta, they're launching product level video, which is probably the most innovative solution that I've seen in quite some time in terms of performance. It's essentially turning every single product that you have in your company, a catalog or SKU based approach, where you take that, you turn it into a video, and you personalize it for every audience that you have across social. That's super powerful. It works absolutely amazing. It has great conversion. And so Hunch in that, right? Just as an example, you wouldn't go to your marketing team or creative team and say, well, if I've got 20,000 SKUs, all right, team, now go out and make me 20,000 images or 20,000 videos and update them every hour or update them every week, right? You don't want to, that's not the ask that you want to have of your creative team. So that's where Hunch comes into play, right? It's given this sort of AI-driven, production at scale capacity to these teams that ultimately, keeps them happy in delivering that solution.
Yeah, I think you hit on something around keeping your employees happy, right? Mundane tasks will burn them out because there's too many of them. They take too long, and they don't challenge people, right? And then they get bored with their jobs, and then you have to hire new people. So I can see where automating a lot of those processes through Hunch and leveraging AI are crucial. And then the other part that I think you hit on that I think is really important, that the industry has been dealing with, the ad industry, for a couple of decades now, is that brands keep squeezing them for better rates, whether that's a reduced part of the media spend, if that's how they get compensated, or lower fees. The agencies need to figure out how can we do more with less so that they can increase their margins, or at least maintain
Correct.
margins and be
Yeah, correct.
profitable.
Yeah, correct. That's 100%. When we talk to, both mid-sized agencies and, sort of global agencies, they are tasked from top down that for the same amount of budgets, let's say that they have to produce at scale for all the different formats, for all the different channels, a video that's cut in different, for different audiences while maintaining the same type of budgets. So that's
Yeah.
definitely the squeeze. And we see that again and again. So I think the most forward-looking agencies, or let's call it the most forward-looking marketing teams, the ones that we see that are really succeeding, are figuring out ways, to really bring that sort of caliber of production and quality of both production and distribution to the brand, and actually differentiate themselves that way and say, look, yes, we can produce 20,000 images and videos, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. and we can distribute them. So that's, essentially what's happening is the native platforms are getting really intelligent, right? So it's kind of like, I'm not saying that they're eating part of the agency's, core, value prop, but they're getting super, super, super smart. So Advantage Plus is a great example. Only a few years ago, the media teams, let's call them performance teams, were really strategizing, how many different campaigns and what's the structure with the ad sets and all this and everybody had their own thing that, their theories around what type of structure would work best. And so what platforms are saying now is scratch all that. Let's keep everything simple, right? Have an Advantage Plus campaign. Just make sure you keep rotating or keep adding in new interesting things, and we'll find the audience. And that's been working well. And that actually directly correlates to Meta's, performance in their stock, right? So what that tells you is that, marketers, and particularly agencies, have to bring something new to the table. They have to innovate on top of super interesting AI. Right. And so that's what we see. That's where we're getting pulled in, right? Those most advanced agencies that are, speaking to the brands, they're figuring out ways, what is the brand doing what is the brand not doing today? And why aren't they doing that today? A lot of times it's a capacity issue. Like just take one video to resize it for all the different formats. It's a capacity issue. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's that, it's either too costly. So that they go after that, or it's hyper localization, or it's, dynamic images and videos, or whatever the strategies might be. So that's something that we see from on the agency side, that a lot of brands are asking for, is like, okay, what else do you bring to the table when you're managing our social spend?
Got it. So I want to dig into a couple of things that you said there. One was, you mentioned Meta. I think you kind of hinted at the stock bump yesterday. What is it that Meta's doing on the marketing side? Obviously, they have their whole Oculus division, MetaQuest, and that's a big part of sort of the future outlook for the company. But what are they doing in the marketing space that's leading the industry? And then I'd also want you to sort of talk about the other social channels. So Snap and TikTok and any others that you're working within. Talk to us about what's really hot in those spaces that marketers need to be thinking about.
Yeah, obviously, Meta is, the go-to for social, currently still, right? As the biggest and the most advanced, performance-driven social network. However, Snap, from what we've been seeing, has been working really well. We work with the Snap team, and what we've been seeing in the market is that they've completely revamped, their sort of algorithms and AI internally. And we've seen across board for a lot of different brands that Snap has been turning the wheels on in terms of performance. So if I was to say, you're probably not doing enough on Snap today, that would be my guess. And across the board, when we look at agencies and brands, they're probably underinvested in Snap in terms of what they could be doing. So we see that time and again in terms of when we talk to our agencies, we say, hey, we see fantastic performance across different verticals, and that and we see that they're maybe a little bit hesitant, but Snap has been growing, and it's one of those things where it's almost like the secret sauce for specific verticals in specific geos that I would say the Snap does really well in. So that would be one. TikTok is obviously massive, right, in terms of their growth and their pace of growth. And, if you're not, you should be definitely thinking about your strategies on TikTok. Our view on that is, that most of our customers and agencies and brands are still in exploratory mode in terms of what they could be doing on TikTok. So they don't really know. And, there's lots of different angles to like UGC type style videos, and how do you scale that, and how do you blend that into your sort of top, mid, and bottom funnel. But each of those platforms in their own right serves a purpose for the audience, right? Because if you think about it, most people are already on Facebook or Instagram. Some might be on TikTok, and specific audiences are definitely on Snap, right? And particularly the younger ones, right? When you're looking at 20 to 35s and 40s, they're mostly on Snap, right? So yeah, I would say in today's world where it's AI driven, I would say build a system where you can easily tap into your data, produce creatives that are placement perfect for Facebook, Instagram, Snap, and TikTok, right? And continuously monitor and switch budgets between those. That's
Yeah,
what I.
yeah, no, I think that's interesting because my son, who mindlessly scrolls TikTok for hours a day, he consumes media very differently than I consume media. Right, we're just different generations, and I'm sure there's a generation in between us and one behind him, or in front of me. We all consume media differently, right? So understanding the audiences of the platforms and what type of creative resonates the best with that audience, and but still getting your brand message out there, your DR message out there, and doing it at scale. So just it seems like it just all comes back together to why somebody needs a platform like Hunch. What's your roadmap look like? I mean, it seems like you're innovating based on what the platforms are pushing out. But does that drive your roadmap, or do you have
Yeah.
one? Yeah,
Yeah.
elaborate on
So
that.
um, most importantly, customers drive our roadmap, right? And I'll give you a long term view, or maybe let's say a midterm view. Obviously, we as Meta business partners for advertising technology, and partners with Snap in terms of maintaining and seeing how they're doing and implementing all of the best things and helping essentially grow adoption of some of their specific products like product level video, which is less than maybe 1% or 2% of the total brands globally are using product level video in the way. And because they don't have production capacity to produce the videos, thereby, partners like Hunch come in and help produce those videos to make them successful. But aside from that, aside from sort of on parity building with our partners, right? Hunch's view on this is we look at our customers. And this is going to sound almost, too simple. But Sean, here's like what a typical process a media person really wants, right? So a media person jumps into their ads manager in the morning, and they look at what's working, right? So they're on a hunt, they're a detective to figure out, did the thesis of the test bring the result that we wanted? So they go in, right, and they're basically like, all right, let's say in this campaign, in this ad set, and here's the number of ads, what ads are working. So here's what one of our customers said, and this is what drives our sort of roadmap. He said, look, I've got 10 ads, 8 of them are shit, 2 of them are actually working. What he really wants, and this is all he wants to click on those 2 ads and have some automatically AI create a brief, send it to somebody somewhere in the creative sphere, right? The creative verse, and then in the next morning, automatically two additional or 5 additional videos or images from that cut appear. That's the problem that they have, right? Now, the way that happens today, we touched on a little bit earlier, which is like, he takes those, he downloads them, he goes to money.com, he creates a ticket, talks to creatives. The creators are, busy, and they're not very creative feeling today. And like, it takes 2 weeks, and like they comment and chat and this and that. And the media guy doesn't like the creative guy. So it's another 2 days. And like, there's all this, company, bullshit, right? To be very frank. So, and then they get the WeTransfer file, they download it, and then they go upload, and that takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Media has gone by, and it's inefficient. It's not spent right efficiently, and so that's the problem. And so Hunch's sort of future is closely aligned to that. And so, how do we produce based off of what is working? How do we efficiently produce based off of the data that's working, based off of the logic of the business, whether it's the sale or whether it's getting rid of inventory or promoting specific things? How do you marry that with the creative that's working, right? And shorten the latency between the production and test. And most marketers spend time today in is to have theses of what could be tested, what is working, continuously looking for that uplift, right? So that's kind of like, if I had to say like the roadmap for Hunch at a very broad sense is that, and that covers, the creative production, distribution, the data feedback loop in terms of figuring that out for different types of channels, so
Well, it
yeah.
takes it takes the subjectivity out, right? It's just the data is the data is the data, right? Like let it make its decisions, and not just based on some creative
Yeah,
person's
and
opinion. Uh,
I would say, Sean, sorry to interrupt you there. I would say the question is, if we talk about that master marketer, right? The sort of the two disciplines kind of meshing together, right? So you have a super creative person, and then you have a super data person, right? So that's the media team and the creative team today. So the question is, will the media team acquire the creative capabilities, right, to do what they want to do, or will the creative team become more data driven and acquire the data capabilities. And so at a very early stage, we see this sort of dichotomy. We see this sort of like tension, right? Some creative agencies are thinking about owning a little bit of that. Some media teams are thinking about doing some very performance creative stuff. So we see this sort of tension. And so we say, let's bridge that, right? Let's create a system where, the media team and the creative team can exist. And so that's part of, where the platform sort of excels.
It's the merging of both sides of the brain.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier your relationship with Meta and Snap. Does that relationship help drive the roadmap as well? I mean, I know it's really about the customer, but are they giving you insights as to what products are coming down the pipe, what products they think would be helpful for marketers on their platform? What's the relationship like with them? How do you work with the platforms from a partnership perspective?
Yeah. So, we are, if we look at the partnerships, when you look at Meta and Snap, partnership is a strong word. We are, one speck of sand, right, in the desert of like these giants, right? So,
Yeah.
we are privy, to, and have an opportunity and are grateful to be part of that partnership. And, we ensure that we are, helping advertisers solve their problems. Now, Meta and Snap will solve problems for the majority of advertisers, right? So they look at the long tail of advertising. We focus in on those that have very specific needs. So mid-market, enterprise, those that have specific solutions they want to tap into data. Meta will never build specific things for specific enterprises. So we come in as a platform that essentially sort of extends, and pulls in different data points in order for that advertiser to be more efficient. So absolutely, we get guidance on, what is important today for Meta and for Snap. And we have sort of we're privy to, what is it that, we should be focusing on to help advertisers be more successful with the advertising dollars that they're spending. Having said that, we ensure that our development roadmap won't get cannibalized, right? Because that's definitely a risk for a lot of, partners. It's, when the AI starts building out, and you have to be very sort of wary in terms of how you build your systems, right? Because tomorrow, Meta and Snap might have the capability for you to produce that video. They already have language learning, models where you can start typing in copy and it'll give you like 20 different options. They already have some things with background removals, so they're kind of like all over the place, right? And our view on that is, the AI that will get built by platforms will have to be sort of broad, but it'll be very sort of, shallow in terms of the learning models. Whereas our approach there is, more of a narrow but deep approach. In other words, for example, we remove backgrounds for catalogs of our advertisers or of our e-com partners. We by far have the smartest AI that removes backgrounds of any technology that exists out there today. In terms of removing backgrounds, let's say, of hats, shoes, and so forth, because we have a large set that we're learning from. And so we look at vertical by vertical basis that we'll be verticalizing the AI. And so our approach to that, our view to that is enhancing the workflow with specific, AI or so, let's say enhancements. Think of it like when you're writing an email today, right? You're writing an email and like something, a sentence gets filled out, right?
Yep,
Gmail's not writing the email for you today yet, or it's not already answering, not yet.
There actually is some technology in the
It's
emails
getting there.
yeah,
but that's
or
kind
rewrite your email. Yeah,
you're kind of guiding the AI. So that's our approach for production, so for creative, in terms of creating systems of rules that within the brand guidelines can produce at scale what the brand needs to be produced, right? Versus, like having AI do all this. And I'll tell you, we work with some of the largest advertisers and smaller advertisers, and equally, both are very, sort of wary of AI doing all this crazy, creative or backgrounds, this and that. That capability exists, but is it getting used? I would say no. Maybe in like a very experimental way with some of the, advanced agencies and brands that we work with. But most creative, people that own the brand, there's large Q&A departments. Like, this is, got to move this here, this logo here for Hunch, it's got to be a little lower, this and that, right? So
yeah.
There's all these different, things that are at play where AI is still far away from being fully autonomous. And so Hunch has that view in our roadmap where we'll help them guide, with both the production and delivery and analysis of that.
It's exciting stuff. Talk to us about how does someone get started with Hunch? Like, what is that? Think about an agency or a brand today, right? They're doing their Meta campaigns. They're logging into Meta. They're logging into Snap. They're logging into TikTok. They're setting up their strategies. They're uploading their creative. How do you take them on day one of an engagement from doing that to getting to what you're describing there with that sort of almost fully automated process, obviously with human interaction. So yeah, take us through how someone gets to that
Yeah,
scale.
sure. So it's a broad question, but I'll answer it broadly and I'll get to details. Depending on where the marketing team is in terms of the maturity curve of technology adoption, right? So we've had customers that are very advanced that come in, they know exactly what they want, and they have a very exact workflow that needs to be scaled. We've had examples, numerous examples of that for some of the larger advertisers that spend hundreds of millions per year. And so for them, we essentially are enabler and capturing their workflow, whatever they want to do, to automate it, right? And so then we're not really teaching, we're not really we're just enabling of what they want to deliver. And there's plenty of examples of that. Typically what happens and how most agencies start with us is they have one specific brand, right, that they have a need to innovate with, or they have a specific need to deliver, whether it's dynamic images or videos or hyperlocal or whatever the case may be. They need something that they want to bring to the client, or the client said, we want to produce this. And so they come to us and we say, we look at the maturity of the team, we look at where they are in terms of the capabilities of creative, the production and the delivery and sort of testing. And then we work with them and we identify where they are. And then we create a sort of an onboarding plan for them. And typically in the first month, it's 80% Hunch, 20% team, customer. Then it's like 50-50, then it's like 80-20 and so forth. And during that process, we as a partner train the team on the latest and greatest on workflow efficiencies, on creative production, on innovation, on distribution systems, and all the playbooks. We're privy to lots of different interesting examples across verticals. So then we go and say, hey, you're not doing this. So going back to that maturity curve, we say, you're here, and here's all the things that you could be or should be doing. And then it's up to the team to say, okay, how fast do we want to deploy that? So if we're talking with a team that if we go to what was that Jeffrey Moore's technology adoption curve, like if we're working with, the early sort of technology enthusiasts, obviously things move super fast. If we have a team that's kind of the laggard, then it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe they're not really ready, right? Maybe they're kind of like, they want it, but they don't really know how, or they actually want to adopt it, but the organization is very lethargic and inert, and they don't know how to handle this. So it really depends where the organization is in terms of, their innovative sort of approach to digital. And then we create that plan. So it's this sounds maybe super complex, but from the point of connection with Hunch to live, it's not 3 months. It's typically 7 days, right? So if you're an e-com shop, you connect your catalog to Hunch, you drop in your Adobe, After Effects, whatever assets, brand kits, then Hunch takes the data, scales it, and then launches it, in whatever platform that needs to be launched in. So that's not, that's less than 7 days from kickoff to launch.
I like that. It's very consultative. You're not giving them the keys to the kingdom and say good luck, like a lot of SaaS companies do. You're making sure that they're using the platform to their fullest advantage based on where they're at. So I like that. Can you give us a case study about, or talk to us about maybe one of your clients that you were able to help them do more without growing their team? Like
Yeah.
going back to the beginning of this conversation, to show us, what does that scale look like? How many people versus how many campaigns or platforms or countries that they can execute on? Can you just sort of summarize that?
Absolutely.
Give us a,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. One of our longest standing customers is a company called G Adventures, for example. I think they're a great example, right? They're a travel company. They have travel packages, the leading Canadian travel company in the world, right? Across globe, they have different packages. So they came to us, Millie, who was in head of marketing at the time, came to us with a very specific case. They've got all the destinations, right? Amazing destinations across the world. They've, all these different offers. And so they used Hunch for production and sort of, creating all of the different variants for all the different, cases or destinations across the world and keeping that. So it was fully dynamic, right? So they weren't doing anything static. It was all dynamic. And so in that case, we started, back in 2000, I want to say 21, maybe, right around Corona, right before or after COVID. But essentially it was, starting small, and they, essentially started increasing, seeing that dynamic, interesting creative solutions actually work. So now they do everything through Hunch, and it was a one-person team. Now it's a two-person team. And now they've got an amazing agency. I think it's Media Monks, that's managing that. And they're scaling, right? And they're, so they have a system that they've built that now, if they want to go from X budget to 5X budget, they have the capability to scale and maintain their performance. This is something that not a lot of brands today have, right? So that's one case. The second case I'll use an example is, localization or hyper localization, right? So we worked with, in Europe, one of the largest scale-ups of this decade, I would say, or last 5 years, a company called Gorillas, which is like a last mile delivery company, like an Uber Eats or something like that, right? That essentially the business case is they have lots of dark stores across Europe, and they have to deliver locally those products, that are around the corner to your doorstep. And so, a two-person team in Berlin, that we worked with, we essentially built a solution that at any given moment maintained, 8 countries, 400 locations, 5,000 images and videos. And we were able to build a system where they were capturing the business logic and testing it constantly. So I'll just give one example. So let's say this was an app install sort of campaign, right? And they wanted to have specific tactics. It was like, use this code, to download the app and get a free 3 deliveries, right, to your doorstep. And it was like, hey, Portland, order the local burritos, or hey, LA, hey, Santa Monica, hey, Mission Viejo, hey, Irvine, whatever, like all these, and then, localized assets and products for those locations. And then that code. So they go into Hunch, they add a code across, and then we produce that and put that code on, 5,000 images of videos, or, whatever the number was, and then deploy it. And then they see if it works, and then they can track it and so forth. So this is something where, it was really helpful to the media team to figure out what's working. And there's plenty of different examples, right? So of different types of brands. Primarily, Hunch excels in, e-commerce, anything that has lots of like a catalog of products, right? Like, lots of locations, lots of different audiences. So anything that there's a big N of, typically, in order to get to the personalization or the contextualization, in order for brand to be relevant, it has to scale production and delivery of that. And so that's what essentially Hunch solves for lots of different verticals.
So just to summarize that, and before we call it a wrap, 2 people are managing 8 countries with, I imagine, within each country, zip code level, creative offers, messaging that changes on a regular basis. Yep. 2 people, because they're using the Hunch platform. Yeah. That sounds amazing. I think what I love most about everything you described was the ability for a brand of any size, team of any size, to build a plan with you that's going to allow them to grow into the space as comfortably as they want based on their tolerance. I really like that because so many tech companies just say go, and they don't know what to do.
I would say, not just from a, Hunch perspective, if you're looking at and we have our marketing team, I think leadership at every company should really think of how can you create the next generation of marketers? What do they need in order for them to be, delivering on the promise of what is asked of them? And so the demands are changing, from platforms are changing. And I think organizations should think about how they're arming their teams to answer to that. The ones that are innovating, the ones that are ahead of the game are the ones that are figuring out ways to free the marketers of all the bullshit that happens, throughout the day, which is probably like lots of hours, and giving them time back. First of all, getting their sleep back, but also getting the time to be more strategic. And then relying on technology partners to scale that strategy. and that's true for us or others. It doesn't matter, but you really have to arm the marketing team with these capabilities today in order to win.
Siggi, thank you for being here and sharing your cogent insights about Hunch. To the audience, you can find Hunch at www.hunchads.com. You can also find more information at www.thecogentcollective.com. Please subscribe to the show from your favorite podcast network and visit us at www.themartechmatrix.com. While you're there, you can find all this information, show notes, and information on upcoming episodes. Until next time, take care.
This episode of the MarTech Matrix was brought to you by the Cogent Collective, a community for marketing and e-commerce leaders. Learn more and inquire about membership at cogentcollective.com. For show notes and information on upcoming episodes, head on over to themartechmatrix.com where you can submit questions for upcoming guests. Once again, thank you, Siggi, for joining us today and educating our audience on today's social media landscape. If you would like to learn more about Hunch and see if they're a good fit for your company, send Sean a note at sean@cogentcollective.com. New episodes of the MarTech Matrix podcast will drop every Monday, so be sure to subscribe with your favorite podcast network so you can stay on top of what's happening in the Matrix.